Jackson Radio Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Kevin Jackson here. Donald Trump continues to confound the left, and many on the right is, the establishment Republicans. And it's funny that when the people say, "Oh, I didn't expect that," and I'm thinking to myself, Donald Trump has told you everything he's going to do, and people are still surprised by it. Glad you guys are with me. It's the Kevin Jackson Show. KJRadio.com. 844-551-8255. So here's the thing that's surprising everybody, that Donald Trump took a staunch stance at the UN against refugees. His position represents yet again a departure from the failed policies of Barack Obama and almost every other world leader, and the left are shocked. They're perplexed. What? This is according to Foreign Policy. President Donald Trump has decided to boycott a global conference on migration scheduled to begin Monday in Puerto Rico, Mexico, sending a blunt signal that the United States is no longer interested in forging a concerted response to the world's burgeoning migration crisis. It's a burgeoning migration crisis. Have you seen this map? There's a map that shows the places where Muslim attacks have occurred. And Poland is a country that says, we're not taking any Muslims. And all around Poland, there's all these Muslim attacks. But it's a white sheet. Just think of it as white with little gray lines marking where the country's borders are. And all over the map, throughout Europe and Asia, and of course North America, whatever, are attacks by Muslims. And there's Poland with this big white spot that's got no red in it. Because these guys are going no, and we're not going to be some German guy was like, Poland needs to take some refugees, and Poland goes, no thanks, it's not going to happen. Anyway, so Donald Trump made the decision, and they were talking about the tax bill and all these other things, and then the Mexican government scheduled to host this 3-day meeting that was meant to figure out what they call a humane approach to handling the more than 60 million refugees around the world, who have been forcibly displaced. Now, the number that I got before was 65.2 million, more people than in any time in history. And as I've said to you folks, the majority of these refugees come from black and brown countries. They come from Africa or the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and almost all of them share one common thing, and that is the Muslim religion or Islam religion. Almost all of them. So essentially, Muslims around the world are creating all kinds of strife, and it's being egged on by Iran, and then they want the world to deal with it. And it is a calculated effort because of the political correct idea around multiculturalization that is destroying these countries. I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't visit Britain now, you aren't going to recognize it in a decade. And I'll be blunt, you don't recognize it today from 20 years ago. France is, for me, unrecognizable. I was there 6 months ago. I don't get it. I'm like, what's up with this? So all of these things are the things that Donald Trump's looked at. He's already taken a tough stance and says, look, I don't mind you having Muslims, but you're not going to have them radicalized. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think in the United States, these so-called moderate Muslims that we think exist, if we are not watching mosque, and if we are not watching the spread, the proliferation of Islam in this country, we are going to be in deep trouble. The Chinese have jumped all over it. They've said, if you've got a Muslim name, you can't get on our assistance. If you are a radical, you're gone, period. Back to your country. They've implemented strict rules. I don't even think you can build a mosque there anymore. But I can't say that with certainty. But anyway, the UN believes it's going to solve this crisis of 60 million people. Think about this. The UN is solving a crisis that it's kind of created. The UN, the United Nations, was established to prevent war. But there's so much war going on that we have more people displaced from their homelands than in any time in history. And now they want to solve the problem by dispersing all these people. Now, we've seen the outcome. I've given you the stats. In the 80s, there was one Muslim terror attack. In the 70s. In the 80s, there were 13. In the 90s, there were 35. And then beginning in the year 2000, there have been over 1,500 attacks, usually over 2,000 attacks, Muslim attacks around the world every year. How do you jump that quickly from where there's less than, a few dozen in a decade to where there are thousands every year, and nobody draw a conclusion that we've let this get out of hand? They said the U.S. president's decision to pull out of the negotiations highlighted the enduring influence of Stephen Miller, a 32-year-old senior White House policy advisor who has championed the Trump administration's effort to sharply restrict immigration to the United States. In recent weeks, Miller led efforts to pull out of the migration talks. Good for him. I remember when this was one of these issues being discussed, that global climate change and all that. And I remember somebody saying, Ivanka's going to talk to the president about global climate change. She's a global climate change person. And I remember thinking, oh, man, he may listen to his daughter. Psst. Ivanka has her views, but her daddy is like, I ain't falling for that mess. And you know what's funny? Other people would succumb to this. Well, we got to look at the humanitarian effort. Now, we have been humane. Every one of the countries where these people are leaving, the United States either has a presence or we've donated crazy money. And, there's only so much you can do. I'm telling you, that's what they talk about. We need an ambassador. To do what? We want to pay a group of people to go over to some country so we can then add more money to it. Watch that money end up in the hands of a ruthless dictator who doesn't like us to begin with, and you think that's a good cycle. There are some countries we just need to cut off. And, these 7 countries that are on the travel ban, if we need to cut them off, cut them off. Get our ambassadors out of there. We can save the money. Taxpayers need it. I think it's crazy that we continue this stuff. Anyway, Nikki Haley, they said what kind of drove this a little bit too was when the president tweeted out this video of the Muslims wreaking havoc on societies that provide sanctuary. And we showed a film where these guys trashed one of their weight center where they had just gotten in, and they said, we don't have cell phones, and we don't want your stinking food and all this. It's bizarre to watch this happening around the world, and the country still capitulating, still rolling out the red carpet. And I could tell you about all the attacks that have occurred, over the past month. While all this decision making is being done, it would have no impact on the left. But the United States is taking a tough stance, and I'm glad about that.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.